For years, Harry Kane lived at the heart of some of the most demanding machines in European football. He was the reference point in the Premier League, carried entire teams on big nights, felt the weight of knowing that if the ball reached the box, the outcome could come down to a single decision. And yet, when Harry Kane finally spoke without a filter, he didn't talk about goals. He talked about fear, not the fear of losing, not the fear of failing, the fear of losing control, because on the other side was Lionel Messi, quiet, distant, almost invisible, until the moment the match stopped belonging to you. So here's the question no one dared to ask. Why did facing Ronaldo feel like certainty, while facing Messi felt like a nightmare? And more importantly, what does that say about football itself? Before we start, drop a like on this video, share it, and subscribe. Because what you're about to hear isn't a highlight recap, it's a confession. To understand why Harry Kane talks the way he does, you have to rewind the clock, not to a single match, but to an entire era. Between 2009 and 2018, football lived through a decade where every season felt driven by the same collision of forces. And even if Kane wasn't inside El Clasico as a main character, he still lived its consequences from the most brutal stage possible. The European elite, where those two names weren't news, they were the weather. Season after season, the same stadiums, the same pressure, the same noise around the sport, and always the same two shadows hanging over every plan. On one side, Cristiano Ronaldo, a forward capable of scoring 50, sometimes 60 goals in a single season. A player who reduced football to something brutally simple. Give him the ball and the problem disappears. For defenders and opposing teams, that kind of threat is like oxygen. But in reverse, it forces you to breathe shallow, to live fixated on a single point of impact. You know where the explosion is. On the other side, Lionel Messi. Not louder, not faster, not more physical. And yet, even at 38, Messi still leads elite competitions with 71 goal contributions in a single season, between goals and assists. Numbers that shouldn't exist at that age. Numbers that mock the very idea of decline. But the stats only tell half the story. Because Ronaldo's numbers announce themselves, they arrive like thunder. Messi's numbers arrive in silence after the match, when you look at the scoreboard and realize something slipped out of your hands. And that's where Harry Kane's confession starts to make sense. Because one legend wins you matches, the other makes you wonder if the match was ever yours to win. So, what exactly did Harry Kane see on the pitch? On those big nights that statistics can't explain. Harry Kane didn't speak at the peak of the Messi-Ronaldo rivalry. He didn't speak after a Ballon d'Or ceremony. He didn't speak when emotions were raw and loyalties demanded silence. He spoke after everything, after changing countries, after leaving behind England's routine and its constant noise, after the cameras stopped waiting for rehearsed answers. And that moment matters. Because when a player is still active at the highest level, every sentence is calculated. Every word protects a locker room, a legacy, a balance. But when Harry Kane finally reflected on Messi and Ronaldo, there was no campaign to protect. No rivalry to feed, just memory. He described something subtle, but devastating. Facing Ronaldo, Kane said, felt like structure. You knew the script. The match had a shape. Even when your team was suffering, there was always that thought in the back of your mind. One chance is enough. The plan didn't have to be perfect. It just had to survive long enough, without conceding that fatal yard. With Ronaldo, the threat was clear. If you let him breathe, if you let him set himself, if you let him attack the box, you pay. But when facing Messi, Kane admitted, the feeling was different. There wasn't one single moment to fear, no obvious danger zone. The fear arrived slowly, through possession, through movement, through small decisions that seemed harmless. One step out of place, half a second late, one defender pulled out of position, and suddenly, the match didn't belong to you anymore. Kane didn't call Messi faster, or stronger, or more decisive in front of goal. He called him something else, a presence that steals the match without announcing itself. And that's why this confession matters. Because it isn't about who scored more goals. It's about who changed the psychology of the game itself. So, what did Harry Kane really mean when he said one felt like a nightmare? When Kane said it, the room went silent. I faced a man, he explained, and I faced a nightmare. No names at first, no drama. Just a pause, long enough for the meaning to sink in. Because everyone knew who he meant. The man was certainty, a forward who turns pressure into routine, a player who asks for the ball when everything else collapses. Against him, Kane said, football felt binary. Defend, endure, survive the hit, and hope you don't make a single mistake. But the nightmare, that was different. A nightmare doesn't attack you head-on. It surrounds you. It bends time. Kane described matches against Messi as games where nothing felt urgent until everything was already gone. You weren't chasing a scoreline. You were chasing control. And the more you chased it, the more it slipped away. That's the paradox Harry Kane revealed. Ronaldo forces you to defend moments. Messi forces you to defend ideas. One demands perfect marking inside the box. The other demands perfect coordination everywhere, all the time. And perfection, as Kane quietly implied, is impossible for 90 minutes. That's why defenders talk about Messi in a lower voice. That's why midfielders talk about spaces that stop existing when he drops in to receive. That's why managers say their plan worked, until it didn't. Kane wasn't minimizing Ronaldo. He was exposing a deeper truth. One legend punishes mistakes. The other creates mistakes you didn't even know you were making. So if that's the difference, certainty versus erosion, what does history tell us about what leaves a deeper scar? Football history is full of great goal scorers. It's much poorer in players who redefine how matches get played. That's where Harry Kane's confession becomes bigger than Messi or Ronaldo. It becomes about football itself. Cristiano Ronaldo fits perfectly into the most familiar mold in history, the ultimate finisher, like Gerd Müller, like Ronaldo Nazario, like Van Basten in his own way. You design systems to contain him, or to survive him. You accept that he might touch the ball 10 times, because one of those touches can decide the match. That kind of player simplifies football, even for the opponent. You know where the danger lives. But Lionel Messi does something far more unsettling. He doesn't stay where the system expects him to be. He leaves zones, drags midfielders backward, pulls defenders forward, and opens gaps where there shouldn't be any. Kane understood this from the most uncomfortable perspective, not as someone who only had to man-mark him, but as someone watching an entire team slowly lose its shape without realizing it. Coaches would say afterward, "Our defensive structure was good, our distances were right, the plan worked." And still, Messi would finish with a goal, an assist, and 3 pre-assists that never show up in the stats. That's the illusion Kane is pointing at. Against Ronaldo, the fear is concentrated. Against Messi, the fear is diffuse. You don't lose because he beats you once. You lose because your team gradually stops recognizing its own shape. That's why coaches often say Messi breaks systems, while Ronaldo finishes. Systems. One destroys the architecture, the other conquers it. And that distinction explains something crucial, because players who faced both often hesitate when asked who was harder. Why does the debate never really end? Why can't stats alone settle it? Because football isn't only what happens inside the box, it's what happens before you even realize the box matters. And that brings us to the final question Harry Kane leaves hanging in the air. If Messi changes the game itself, what does that mean for the future of football? Kane never said Messi was better. He said something much more unsettling. He suggested that football itself behaves differently in Messi's presence. And that idea carries a warning, especially for the future. Because when coaches, analysts, and fans talk about the next generation, they usually look for the next Ronaldo or the next Messi, as if both paths are equivalent. But Kane's confession hints that they aren't. Ronaldo represents an evolution of excellence. Stronger, faster, more efficient. The highest point of what football already understood, a forward who perfects the final act. Messi represents something completely different. He represents a distortion. That's why so many young stars struggle when they're compared to him. Not because they lack talent, but because talent alone can't recreate the influence. You can train finishing, you can improve movement, you can optimize physical output. But how do you train a player to silently control an entire match? Kane saw it up close. He saw teams defend well, press intelligently, follow instructions, only to slowly abandon them, not out of panic, but out of confusion. Players started reacting instead of deciding. That's Messi's real legacy. He doesn't just win matches, he changes how opponents think while the match is being played. And that's why Harry Kane's words matter beyond nostalgia. They challenge the direction of modern football, a sport increasingly obsessed with structure, data, and predictability. Messi is the anomaly that survives every system designed to eliminate anomalies. And here's the uncomfortable truth Kane hints at without saying out loud. Football can produce another great goal scorer. It can even produce another ruthless winner. But it may never again produce a player who makes professionals doubt their own understanding of the game while barely saying a word. So when Harry Kane calls one a man and the other a nightmare, he isn't taking sides. He's describing two different relationships with fear. And with that, we reach the end. Harry Kane didn't close the Messi versus Ronaldo debate. He reframed it. One legend gives you certainty, the other takes it away. One punishes your mistakes, the other convinces you mistakes are inevitable. Now the question belongs to you. If you were on that pitch, defending a title, a season, a legacy, who would you rather face? The executioner you can prepare for, or the nightmare you can never fully understand? If this story made you see football differently, drop a like on the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments, does Harry Kane's confession change your answer in the Messi-Ronaldo debate? Even after the cameras shut off, Kane's words don't. Because deep down, every fan recognizes that feeling. You can respect the goals, you can admire the trophies, you can even accept defeat. But there's something uniquely unsettling about a player who makes you feel late. Late to press, late to cover, late to understand what just happened. That's why this debate never dies. Not because fans are stubborn, but because football offers two different fears and forces you to choose which one you can live with. The fear of the inevitable finish, or the fear of losing control of the match itself. Kane didn't try to end the conversation. He exposed why it will never end. And maybe that's the true legacy of Messi and Ronaldo. Not the numbers, not the trophies, but the fact that football, even today, still doesn't know which fear is worse. If you made it this far, subscribe now. Because the next confession might challenge everything you think you know about football's greatest legends.